Today, we're diving into the absolutely unbelievable life of a man named Bill Perry, and we're telling it all in his own words. It is a wild journey that starts in a quiet little town, but ends up pushing the very limits of life and death, and it might just challenge what you think is possible. Okay, let's just start with this. This is the sentence at the very heart of Bill Perry's entire story. It's a massive claim, right? And it's our starting point. How does a person get to a place where they can say something like that with total conviction? Well, to figure that out, we have to look at the lifetime of events that brought him to this point.
So, to really get that quote, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. We're going to follow the path he walked, literally from his first breath to the moment his heart actually stopped beating.
And that path starts in North Carolina, where, believe it or not, this whole idea of miraculous survival became a theme for him from day one.
What's so amazing here is the contrast. On one hand, Perry remembers his childhood as just perfect. He calls it a mix of Little House on the Prairie and Happy Days. But that peaceful picture was born out of a life-or-death situation. Doctors straight up told his parents that this birth was a gamble, that he could be born dead, his mother could die, or maybe both of them.
So, the main takeaway here? From the very start, people were calling him a miracle child. First, he survives that incredibly risky birth. Then, a little later, he survives 3 different blood clots. This idea of him being medically, well, unexplainable, it's something that would stick with him his entire life.
All right, get ready because the story is about to take a hard left turn. The family picks up and leaves that quiet life in North Carolina, and they move right into the chaos of New York City in the 1970s. This new place was going to test his survival in a whole new way.
And look, they didn't just move to New York. No, they moved to the South Bronx, a neighborhood so legendary for its danger, it had the nickname Fort Apache. This wasn't just a change of address. It was like being dropped onto a different planet, one where you had to fight to survive every single day.
And the danger wasn't some abstract idea. It was real, and it was right there. He lived near one of the most feared gangs of the time, the Savage Skulls. For him, they weren't just a story on the news. They were a constant presence on his block.
He's honest about it. The fear was very real. But then something totally unexpected happened. He offered a gang member a cigarette. A simple, small act. And that tiny gesture ended up buying him a sort of truce. It gave him a pass to walk safely through a neighborhood where most people couldn't.
But the dangers weren't just on the streets. I mean, look at this number. 3. That's how many times an elevator he was in just dropped. It went into a free fall 3 separate times before he managed to get out. The trauma from that alone was so intense, it left him with PTSD he still deals with today.
And the close calls just kept piling up. It wasn't just the elevator. He almost drowned in a crowded pool at a party, and nobody even noticed. But through all of this, he always felt what he calls being naturally covered, like some kind of invisible shield was protecting him.
So let's just quickly recap his life in 4 acts. You've got the miraculous birth down in North Carolina. Then, the trial by fire in the Bronx. Later, he moves to Florida and becomes a man of deep faith. And that brings us to today, where he's found a new calling as an author.
So now we're in Act 3, his years in Florida. And this is where his experiences really shift from just surviving physical danger to facing things that seem to flat out defy reality. So, get this. His day job was as a private investigator. He was even trained by the famous Vinnie Parco, and he was dealing with the absolute darkest side of humanity: murder, missing people, human trafficking. But outside of that gritty work, his personal life was getting, well, supernatural.
Okay, and this is where the story goes from just close calls to things that honestly don't make any sense. He starts having these experiences he just can't explain. A church filling up with a fog that only he could see, feeling an earthquake in that same church that nobody else felt, seeing a fire in the street that just wasn't there. He even claims a brand new tooth grew into his mouth and his wife confirms she could feel it, only for it to vanish a few days later.
So you take all of it. The miracle birth, the near-death experiences in the Bronx, all those strange visions in Florida. And it feels like it was all building towards this. We've finally arrived at the main event, the claim that kicked this whole story off.
The date was February 12th. He was in the hospital for a minor back procedure, totally routine. He was literally getting ready to go home. And then, in a blink of an eye, everything went sideways.
He remembers the moment so clearly.
He just looked down at the cup of sweet tea he was holding and saw it, sparkling. That was his very last thought. In his own words, he became the walking dead because he died right there, in the middle of a step.
Suddenly, it's a code blue blaring through the hospital. His own stepdaughter, who worked as a nurse there, found him. No breathing, no pulse. He was gone. The medical team managed to bring him back, but only for a second, and then he was gone again. He was dead for a second time, and this time he was gone long enough for his skin to turn gray.
And then, right as the doctors were about to call his time of death, he came back. He actually describes the feeling of returning to his body, coughing, praying, and calling out the name of Jesus, even though he was barely conscious. For him, this wasn't a medical revival. He says he was called back.
And that just leads us to the biggest question of all, doesn't it? After a whole life spent surviving one impossible thing after another, from the day he was born to the Bronx to that hospital bed, what on earth could the purpose of all that be?
Well, for Bill Perry, the answer is his story. He believes his purpose now is to share it all, to connect his own trauma, his work fighting human trafficking, and his unshakable faith. And in the end, he leaves it up to us to decide where we draw the line between pure luck, incredible resilience, and maybe something truly miraculous.